Hey again, everyone. This is Michael Patterson. I'm about to continue with Bio 233 Endocrine. We're going to talk about growth hormone to start, and if we have time, we'll go to some of the other hormones as well. Growth hormone is one of the most complicated ones, so we're going to spend a little bit of time on this one today in this lecture. So let's switch over to our lecture notes. I've already started to put some things in, and the main reason I started to type some things in is because obviously, one, my writing isn't very good using my Surface Pen, but it just will make make it a little bit easier for me. Now, you don't need to write all these in right now. I'm going to go in order, and you'll kind of see how I'm doing this, and I'll be adding more stuff in. You'll notice there's a lot of boxes that still don't have anything. Mainly that was because I couldn't type in those boxes exactly and make it line up, so I didn't want to do it. So we're looking at growth hormone. One other thing is the growth hormone, there's a picture very similar to this on page 614 of your notes. Let's see if we can get there really quickly here. Unfortunately, the eText logs me out after a certain number of minutes, so often we're not in the right place. But here we are back in the endocrine system. Oh yeah, by the way, also, all of the hormones that are in the pituitary gland are listed in table 16.3. So you see oxytocin and antidiuretic hormone there. And then we get to growth hormone and thyroid stimulating hormone and all the other hormones here that we're going to talk about, the 8 total ones. And you can see there's lots of different ones here. And what we wanted to talk about first, and we'll come back to some of the other ones later, is growth hormone. And so table 16.5 is on page 614, is very similar to the one that I have here. I think ours is a little more complex, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But so you can look at this, and you can kind of follow along or use the one in your notes, which is the one I'm going to highlight right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight certain things down here in the notes and then bring them up into this picture. So first off, we want to talk about human growth hormone. So we sometimes call this HGH or just GH. I'll usually just refer to it as GH, but it is often, because it's human, referred to as HGH. And human growth hormone is also called somatotrophin, and this is because it's released from somatotroph cells of the anterior pituitary. So that's why the name is that, okay? And these are the most numerous cells. It gets released in response to one of these releasing hormones that comes from the thalamus. So it gets released in response to growth hormone releasing hormone. That's GHRH. And you'll notice the releasing hormones tend to have an RH at the end for releasing hormone, and the inhibiting hormones, if there is one, has an IH for inhibiting hormone. And this one is called somatocrinin also. So usually I just refer to it as GHRH, and I refer to growth hormone as GH, but good to know these other terms as well. And there are different things that will cause the hypothalamus to release GHRH. One of these is low blood levels of growth hormone. That kind of makes sense. If growth hormone's low, we want to produce more. If glucose is low, these are all low levels here, we might want to produce more, and we can think about why in a minute, why we might do that. If IGFs are insulin-like growth factors, and they're shown up here at the top of the page. And so if those are low, we often will stimulate growth hormone release. Again, we'll talk about why in a minute. Fatty acids, that's another food source. So if glucose, a food source, is low, fatty acids could be low. And if we have high amino acids, meaning that we've got a lot of amino acids available to build structures, or we're exercising, that actually will also trigger the hypothalamus to release HGH, okay? So all of those things could trigger the hypothalamus. Now, we're going to focus on a few of those more than every single one, but let's go back up to the top now and look at what's happening. Okay, so notice what it says here. Go to the very top and look right in this area. Hypothalamus secretes GHRH. Okay, now that GHRH is going to stimulate stimulate. I'm just going to write stim. Okay, stim. Can you see that as stim? If you wonder why my writing is so bad, is I'm left-handed and it's really hard to write with this on the screen and not put your hand on the screen and mess other things up. So it's going to stimulate the anterior pituitary to secrete. So the anterior is going to secrete growth hormone. Okay, so now let's take what we learned last time and apply what's happening. So the growth hormone, releasing hormone, is produced up here in the hypothalamus, and it travels down the portal system and goes to the anterior pituitary, right? So it goes down that HH portal system in through the blood, and it stimulates those somatotroph cells to release growth hormone, okay? And it does this because we have low levels of growth hormone, we have low levels of glucose, so on and so forth. Okay. Now, that growth hormone is going to be released. Okay. Now, let's focus on the arrows that are green right now and not the red arrows. We'll come back to those, okay, in a moment. So growth hormone is going to have a couple different direct effects, okay? So the first thing is it's going to go to liver and to other tissues, but liver is the main one. And the liver is going to make insulin-like growth factors, okay, which are IGFs. And these insulin-like growth factors indirectly, because the growth hormone's not stimulating them, the growth factors are stimulating various parts of the body to do stuff. So what is it going to do? Well, the first thing is there's going to be skeletal effects. Skeletal effects. Okay. And the skeletal effects are going to increase cartilage. Remember, we have cartilage all over our skeletal on the ends of long bones and cartilaginous joints, things like that. And we're going to also increase skeletal growth. It also is going to have extra skeletal effects. EFF. I'm just going to write extraskeletal. This means outside the skeleton, right? Other effects in the body. One is it's going to cause protein synthesis. So growth hormone, unsurprisingly, will build proteins. It will make proteins that we could use to make muscle or bone or other structures. And it will also increase the activity of cell growth. So our cells will grow and divide and get bigger. Makes sense. It's growth hormone. So we are going to affect the skeleton directly with cartilage and skeletal growth. We're going to affect other tissues extraskeletally outside of the skeleton to make more proteins and to increase cell growth. Now it might make sense why a lot of amino acids in our blood would increase growth hormone being released. Because if we have a lot of amino acids, that means we can make a lot of proteins. And so if we have a lot of the building blocks there, we might want to produce a lot of proteins with those amino acids. Okay, now that's one side. The liver and other tissues, mainly the liver, but other tissues can do this too. Now, we also have anti-insulin actions, things that work kind of opposite to insulin. So insulin normally does things like reduce blood glucose, right? We take glucose out of our blood when insulin's released. So, but we want glucose in our blood if we're going to be growing and making things, right? We need to make ATP. So what'll happen when growth hormone is released is one thing that'll happen is carb metabolism. We want to have a lot of carb breakdown, and there, as a result, we want to increase blood glucose. We want that glucose available in our blood so we can build things, make things grow. Okay? The other thing we will do is we will go to fats, and we will increase lipolysis. All right, think of that word, lipofat, lysis, breakdown. We're going to break down fats into their monomers. And the reason why is we can use those for fuel as well. So both of these things right here, these things, are going to increase the amount of fuel we have in our body. So we can do all of the growth hormone effects. Okay? So it's kind of interesting because growth hormone works a little bit like insulin might and a little bit not like insulin does. So that makes it kind of unique. Now, everything I just wrote in there is down here. So let's do a little highlighting. All right, so the targets are widespread. So directly it goes to the liver, right, to make the IGFs, and fats and glucose. The indirect effect is that the growth hormone causes the liver, so indirectly, the growth hormone causes the liver and other organs to release the IGFs, insulin-like growth factors, somatomedins, that indirectly affect cartilage and bone and muscle. Now, note the indirectly is referring to growth hormone. These insulin-like growth factors, and I'm actually these directly affect the insulin-like growth factors directly affect cartilage and muscle and bone. The growth hormone indirectly affects them. Okay? So there we go. We've seen everything that's happening there. We're going to increase metabolism on this side here. We're going to increase growth and synthesis of things over on this side. So now we need to look at our negative feedback. And this is a hormone that does use negative feedback. So everything that's up here that stimulated the release, these things, if they're in opposition, will stimulate the stopping of making the growth hormone, right? Does that make sense? So we're using negative feedback. So high levels of growth hormone will shut itself off, which makes sense. If you make too much growth hormone, we should shut off and not make more. High levels of glucose should shut it off. If we have too much glucose, that would be bad and we need to stop. High levels of IGFs. If we have too many of those, we're doing too much growing and building, so we should stop. So all of these things there will cause the hypothalamus to release growth hormone inhibiting hormone. This is our first inhibiting hormone. And this is called GHIH. And this is called somatostatin. And this one's kind of an important one because we'll see this one show up another time. When we get to thyroid. So it's good to remember this one. So what GHIH will do will stop the anterior pituitary to stop secreting the growth hormone. And this is up above. So if we now go above here and look, I've added a couple things in here. So look at this first arrow, the red arrow right here. Okay, growth hormone. So what we need to say is high levels of growth hormone are going to make a negative feedback. Here, let's draw a couple things in. Actually, we can redo that. Say, high levels of growth hormone will cause negative feedback. Okay? And what that will do is it'll inhibit GnRH, it'll stop the releasing hormone, and it will stimulate the GHIH, and that will cause the secretion to stop, right? It'll cause secretion to stop. Oh my gosh. It's clicking all over the place here, sorry. Okay. Now, we also said increased IGFs will do that same thing. It'll go and cause negative feedback. It'll cause the GnRH to stop, and we will release GHIH, and that will cause GH to not be produced anymore. And then lastly, we want to increase the amount of glucose. Or if we increase the amount of glucose, we'll have a negative feedback. And that glucose will also cause negative feedback. Oh, here, why don't I do this? I have the ability to make it the same color. Okay, so we've got three main ones that we care about. High levels of growth hormone will shut it off. High levels of IGFs will shut it off. High levels of glucose will shut it off. It'll cause the inhibiting hormone to be released, and that will stop the anterior pituitary from making growth hormone. Okay. So that's a lot. That's a big one. This is our most complicated of these pathways that we're going to cover. But you do need to know this pathway. This pathway is an important pathway. And it's going to work with some of the other hormones to do things like thyroid, like our thyroid hormones. So we're going to come back and talk about this multiple times. Okay. So really understand and know growth hormone. Now, one little note, there is a similar mechanism that we see here than the placenta. So we have a, I'm going to even just change this color entirely just so we know we're on a different topic here. The placenta releases this thing called somatomammotropin. Okay, it resembles somatotropin. And what it will do, so, and remember, somatotropin is growth hormone. So that is growth hormone. Right? And what it does is it increases the maternal blood glucose and increases fatty acid levels. So the placenta itself can notice if blood glucose and fatty acid levels aren't high enough for the fetus, and it will release its own hormone, somatomammotropin, to work just like growth hormone does. So that's kind of interesting and kind of cool. Okay, so what does growth hormone function to do then? If we think about what we just talked about, what are all the functions of growth hormone? So, first, it turns on almost all body cells for growth. That makes sense. Almost every body cell is a target cell for growth hormone. It increases the rate of growth, development, and it maintains size. So even when you're an adult, you have growth hormone be released to maintain the size of your structures that you have right now. So that's important. There's some words here that you might remember, or you might not have remembered, but you have anabolism and catabolism. And anabolism is creation. So if you want to write the word creation right here, right on where anabolism is above it, that would be great. I'm not going to do it. But it increases protein creation, anabolism, by bringing those amino acids in so we can build proteins. It increases catabolism, which is breakdown of fats. Remember, we called it lipolysis. So, and that will release fatty acids from the cells, and we can use that for energy. It uptakes sulfur, so we can use make chondroitin sulfate for cartilage. And it also, the more important ones to me, is it increases glycogen synthesis, which actually that is incorrect. Let's change that. Get rid of this. This is switched. We're going to write in some new words here. Forget that this is an error here. It encourages glycogen breakdown in the liver, and this will then will release glucose to make it available. Release glucose, or maybe we can even say it another way. Increase glucose availability in the blood. Okay, so that's important. We want to take our stored glycogen, break it down, and increase glucose availability in the blood. It also, and so that is that term that is called glycogenolysis. So think of that, breakdown, lysis of glycogen. That increases glucose in the blood, and it causes kind of a diabetic-like effect because we are increasing a lot of glucose in the blood. Okay, but the most important part is to know this word, glycogenolysis. Right, that is the breakdown of glycogen in the liver, increasing glucose in the blood. Okay, now, what if some things are going wrong? Abnormalities. Okay, hypersecretion of HGH, oversecretion, right? Hyper means an excess of. We can have gigantism. Now, gigantism is seen in children, and this is because the epiphyseal plate has not closed, and therefore we get really long elongation of long bones. So we can get, really, really big, tall individuals. And this is often most common due to a tumor. But we can have a similar thing happening in adults. So this is called acromegaly, which is seen in adults, and this is after the plates close. So we're not going to get long bone growth, but we're going to get enlarged and thickened bones. And so all over our body, our hands, feet, face, jaw, they will get thicker and thicker. And also, remember, growth hormone acts on many different tissues, so soft tissue also continues to grow. The tongue can get bigger, the liver can get enlarged, kidneys can get bigger. And remember, we're releasing glucose into the blood all the time when growth hormone is high. So we get chronic hyperglycemia, and that will cause diabetes mellitus and atherosclerosis. Atherosclerosis is due to the high level of glucose that's in the blood, and it will actually start to kind of stick to the walls and kind of cause damage to the walls, and then the walls try to repair themselves and get scar tissue. So high levels of glucose can actually cause plaque formation and hardening of the arteries. So that's not good. Hyposecretion of HGH. So this is low levels, right? Low levels of HGH. We're going to see in children pituitary dwarfism. And this is often due to a genetic disorder, and this is where early closure of the epiphyseal plates occur. We also have another one, which is a genetic trait called progeria, and this is the one that maybe you've seen before, where kids look really old by the time they're like 7 years old, and after about the first year, they really start to degenerate, and they're not getting enough HGH, and so their body doesn't grow and develop correctly, and they have lots and lots of problems. So those are a couple of the disorders that you should know if we have too much HGH or too little HGH. Okay, we're going to stop here, and the next one we're going to pick up is going to be the thyroid stimulating hormone, and we'll put that on the next page. Okay. All right. Thanks.